So Alex, you had a recent job transition. Why don't you start by telling me about that as it relates to your previous position?
It's a very interesting opportunity that came up. As you know, I used to be the Director of Science and Technology Liaison with Environment Canada, in essence helping communicate science to decision makers and users of Environment Canada's science. And an opportunity came up in Hamilton, which is the city where I was based, to join the United Nations University as a senior fellow and knowledge broker with the Institute on Water, Environment and Health, but also to take on the job as senior advisor for the chair of United Nations Water, which is the coordinating agency for all of the UN agencies that are involved in water, and there are about 28 of them, and something like 26 partners. So it's a fantastic opportunity. I'm on leave of absence for about a couple of years, and it's going to be wonderful.
Sounds great. So what kind of work do you do with the UN now then?
Well, as I say, senior advisor to the chair of UN Water, and that's a lot of work with agencies which are supporting the work of UN Water, so national governments of various countries, but also working directly with the partners and task forces. With United Nations University, one of the key things that I'm doing is helping make sure that science also gets into
Specifically into UN policies?
Well, no, in general, making sure that decision makers, and particularly at the UN level, but elsewhere too, have the right information to be able to work forward. And, you know, it's been a terrific opportunity to put into action what we've been doing with Environment Canada for the past 5 to 10 years, which is building a capacity in knowledge translation and brokering. And as part of this conference, one of the things that I was able to carry through, my new boss, the director of the UNU Institute, and also currently the chair of UN Water, Dr. Zafar Adil, was very keen that I come because the Institute is very interested in the whole issue of knowledge management and taking that whole panoply of knowledge activities, whether it's knowledge translation or mobilization or brokering, knowledge adoption, and making sure that we are involved in that in the future. I want to tell you a little bit about the conference, the workshop that we organized under the auspices of the Canadian Science Policy Conference, because it was a terrific opportunity. We set ourselves a goal of having about 100 people at this workshop to look at the whole area of knowledge translation and brokering. We had some terrific partners, Environment Canada being the principal one, together with Research Impact, which is a conglomerate of several universities, 6 universities across the country, and the Canadian Water Network, who are also all very interested in this area. And I characterized the whole workshop as part of a voyage. Some people embarked early, some, like me, joined partly along the way, and there were people at this workshop who were really doing this for the very first time and trying to figure out whether this was in fact what they're doing. And I'm going to take a little step back. If you look at knowledge translation and brokering, it sits on a scale of communication, which starts with science communication, if you will, and that's very often done by big C communications, which are the communications departments of various agencies, which make sure that there's a consistent messaging or that the minister is well served by departmental communications. And or universities have communications departments. And what they've tended to do historically is push the information out. So here's our science, off you go and do what you want with it. But if you begin to move towards knowledge translation is really where you're taking that science and trying to figure out what the audience wants, when they want it, how they want it. So do they want it in an email blast on a Sunday evening? Would they prefer a briefing in person? Would they like a quarterly newsletter or an email letter once a week? And figuring out how to get the science to the user in the form that they want it, when they want it. Now, if you take it a step further to be able to mobilize that knowledge, you can have intermediaries called knowledge brokers who function at the interface of, say, science and policy and help make sure that the science community understands the needs of the policy community, because when the policy community is acting, they need their information on 3 timescales. They want it either right now, they want it by Friday, or they want it whenever. And scientists work on completely different timescales, obviously, so they have to appreciate the needs of the policymaker, but the policymaker also needs to understand the way that science works. And knowledge brokers can act at that interface, being brokers to help frame researchable questions, to ensure that the right people get together. Now, it's not going to supplant the direct communication between scientist and policymaker, because that should always be there. But scientists are very busy, policymakers are busy, they don't know the whole landscape, and quite often scientists are very focused on their science. We heard, in fact, yesterday that in a survey of the 25 postdoctoral fellows in a certain organization, that when they did a Myers-Briggs on them, 22 of them turned out to be introverts. So they aren't perhaps the best people to be out there promoting their science, but if there's somebody there to help, that's actually pretty useful. And the workshop yesterday was very much about moving forward from the work that has been done to try to make sure that this whole new field of knowledge translation and brokering is legitimized, whether it's in the federal government or whether it's in the university sphere, and making sure that science is used, because science is only useful if it's used. Now, of course, there's pure knowledge and so on, I respect that fully, but in the government world that I used to work in, we're talking about applied science, and you can do the greatest science in the world, but if nobody knows about it and is using it, then it's useless.
So that's all very interesting, actually. You mentioned that perhaps scientists often aren't the best people to actually be the brokers of their own science, to frame it correctly for people who are actually going to be digesting it and applying it and using it in government or wherever else that may be. What sort of professional background do you envision an ideal knowledge broker having?
There are various schools of thought on this and about where they should sit, whether they should sit in the policy shop or the science shop. And I'm fairly Catholic on that. They should sit in the best place that they can. There have been a number of studies now which are trying to evolve the field. And we're finding that really you need a person with great communication skills, good social skills. Some sort of professional background, in my opinion, does help, because it helps particularly within the science world to establish some legitimacy. If you that's not to say you can't do it if you don't have a science background at all, but in my experience it's helped to have a science background. You need to have people who are quick on their feet, great networkers, and there's a whole list of qualities. In fact, we're seeing knowledge brokering jobs appear in, with increasing frequency. Now, the whole field really evolved in the medical field, first of all, and is now being taken up in far messier fields in terms of environmental policy. For example, environmental sustainability is very messy in terms of the inputs, as opposed to something like the health field, where, you know, if you don't take a drug, you're going to die, and you should know about that. And it's perhaps far tighter in terms of its framing. So one of the things that came out yesterday is perhaps we don't want to be too circumscribed about what knowledge brokers should be, because very often these people have qualities of mavericks. They're people who sometimes ask for forgiveness rather than permission, and mea culpa there, sometimes I've been there too.
That's excellent. Well, thank you very much. That was all very interesting.
Okay.
Would you like to speak about anything else?
Well, I'd just like to add that one of the things that we're looking at doing is what the next steps from this workshop are, because there's tremendous energy in the room. I think that although we wanted 100 people to make it a very quality experience for the participants in terms of breakout sessions, at one stage I counted 106 people in the room, so people were sneaking in. And people are at different stages of evolution in this field. There's some people, as I said, who are very experienced, some who are neophytes in it. So we really want to look at how best we can form either a community of practice or to try to bring these various K's together, because as I said, there's knowledge adoption, knowledge transfer, knowledge translation, knowledge brokering. So we're thinking of a K-star sort of concept where we might be able to bring these folk together in the future.
Sounds like an interesting project. I wish you the greatest successes in it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.